Hey guys, AlphaSeagull here. No, that thumbnail isn't clickbait, neither is the title. Burn damage is indeed broken, but not in a good way. You can in fact reach 2 billion burns, it's actually pretty easy in New Game, but it's so painfully pointless to do this that a build with just around 200 stacks can easily outdamage it. Not that you'd be able to find out, because if you tried to do this, the game will crash. It all started when Cocobello hit the highest burn count I've ever seen in this game using Bagataro's ability to double the burn on a target repeatedly. He reached 2 billion and when he doubled it again, the number disappeared and the game crashed during Simon's next turn. I instantly knew what happened. He hit the integer limit. So computers have to store all their information in bits, ones and zeros, and those bits have to be organized in sections so that we know where to separate one part of the code from another. Coders will use different formats to store numbers depending on what ranges of numbers they expect to have and how much storage is available. You can tell which format it has based on where things start to bug out, since the bug is usually caused by integer overflow. When the number gets so high, it loops back around. Back in Gen 1 Pokemon, you could actually use the rare candies to level your Pokemon above 100, and if you kept doing that until they hit 255 and tried it again, they would become level 0, signifying that levels were stored with 8-bit unsigned integers. I can tell based on where the burn stopped displaying that burn stacks are stored with a 32-bit signed integer, the default for a lot of modern software, which means during overflow, the burn stacks went negative and the game tried to run the damage formula on a negative amount of burn. You'd think that would just heal Simon instead, since healing is just negative damage, but because they have a depreciation formula based on the number of burn stacks, I'm thinking the game got an error it couldn't handle when it tried to process the formula and that's why it crashed. Or at least that's what I used to think, until replicating and setup on my own game and getting it crashed even when I was below this point. Using a bigger integer to store burn stacks wouldn't actually solve the problem, since this kind of setup has unlimited turns and exponential scaling. We're only able to get this high because we can move 30 turns in a row. If they use a 64-bit integer, all we'd need to do is move 30 more turns to reach the new limit. They could just add a hard limit to burn count, but let's face it, they've kinda already done that. Remember how I mentioned they have a depreciating formula? Well, this video got me digging into a massive rabbit hole of burn damage, leading me to this Reddit post by Jahyuk. They did a lot of research on the actual burn damage formula, including figuring out the actual depreciation amount. And let me tell you, it's insane. Look at this graph here. The stacks after 200 only deal 1% as much as the first stack. And this isn't even including the fact that linear stacking in general already has depreciating results over time, at least when it comes to how much each stack matters. The more I looked at this, the more I thought, man, it's a pain to do all this math. So I made another calculator. Are we even surprised at this point? The burn depreciation was the hardest part. The way I did it was to get the burn stack value, split it into an array, starting with the first 9 and then push 10 onwards until we finally ran out of stacks. Then I'd assign an index number to each value starting with the first 10, multiply them by 0.8 to the power of the index, then sum up the entire array, giving me my burn stack multiplier. Since I didn't know how to write this in JavaScript, I just had ChatGPT do it, which works surprisingly.
You know, despite it all.
But the more stacks I had, the laggier the calculator got, which kind of makes sense since it's doing an entire new, harder calculation for each 10 stacks. There may be an actual formula I could use to just figure out the total burn damage with just one calculation, but that's a problem future me can figure out. For now, I just added an arbitrary cap to the formula at 1,000 stacks. Oh, but Seagull, aren't you worried about inaccuracies? Not really. Every 100 stacks makes about 10% of the impact of the last 100. By the time you're like 1,000 stacks in, you get to a point where it's difficult to even cause a rounding error. But if you can't get more burn damage with stacks, how are you supposed to get more burn damage? Pretty much all the other ways you'd think. According to Juck's Reddit post, burn damage takes half of your attack, then that value gets reduced by your defense, then given either a 10% boost or 21% depending on which character you pick, and then has the weird depreciating stack thing. Most Lumas apparently don't do anything at all. Upon further investigation, I found over half of that is false. The character you pick doesn't matter at all, defense doesn't matter at all, almost all of your damaged Luminas do matter, but yes, it does take half of your attack, and the burn depreciation formula is 100% accurate. Can't blame the post for being wrong though, it was made pretty early in the game's lifespan, and there was a lot of hidden stuff we don't know, like how a lot of Luminas secretly gave you a 10% damage buff, which would explain the weird character multipliers. The defense thing could have also been a bug that's been fixed since then, who knows. Anyways, with this knowledge, I've gotten my calculator to replicate burn values to the exact number, even on fully optimized builds. The way I did this was to spend hours testing each individual damage buff and how it interacts with burn. Yes, every single one, or at least every interaction that you would think might apply to burn, like all the general damage buffs. Here's the main rules I found. Rule 1 is that character buffs do not matter whatsoever. Twilight, stances, stains, verso rank, almighty mask, none of it makes a difference. What does matter is pretty much all weapon passes and luminas that increase either general damage or burn damage specifically. So even though Verso's normal rank buff doesn't apply to burn, the buffs from Confuso and Corpeso apply just fine. Although the number is lying to you. It's not actually giving you 300% more, it's 200% 200% more, which is 300% of your normal damage, but it shouldn't be written like this. While Defenseless works to boost burn damage, both Powerful and Mark don't do anything, which is hilarious because burn damage can proc Powerful Mark. Don't ask me why. Rule 2 is that interactions between multiple characters applying burn are super weird, but regardless of what you do, nearly all of the burn will be calculated using the current stats of the first character to apply burn. What this means is that if I first have exactly one burn stack from my Verso who's very strong, and have literally all the rest of my burn stacks coming from my Minoko who's very weak, I will get the full calculation with Verso's damage and then a tiny bit extra for some reason. Slightly more than the same exact Verso build getting the same number of burns by itself, at least before Solo Fighter comes in and completely invalidates this boost. And before you ask, yes, I did test to see what happens if all my characters have really strong burn damage and their contributions to the damage are still basically non-existent. You are just better off using Solo Fighter. It also means that no matter how strong the character is when they apply the burn, the game will only consider how strong they are when the burn actually ticks. This is very important for things that can change as the battle progresses, like passives that involve Twilight, rank, or stances. Even if my Verso starts at rank D and I proc the burn at rank D, it only cares if I'm at S when it ticks. Rule 3 is that some effects are additive and some are multiplicative, which is important for choosing which effects to prioritize. Like you'd think Sucresso would be just as strong as Corpeso if I just reached S rank with it twice, but Sucresso's 200% only stacks additively with all these Luminas, which means its actual damage boost is more like 70% on an optimized build. Meanwhile, Corpeso is multiplicative, which means you're going to get exactly a 200% boost at rank S no matter what. Not that Sucresso couldn't get stronger in theory, but you need like 8 turns of stacking instead of 2 before you reach that point. Rule 4, most of this nonsense doesn't matter, because burn damage in general is incredibly weak. I mean, look at this insanely strong Verso build using, I kid you not, basically everything that boosts burn damage. I even have on Feint to give me extra damage on Tainted, which actually counts as 2 statuses for some reason, and yes, I am taking Inverted Affinity into account there. So the only way to deal more damage than what I'm doing right now is to use a setup that scales my damage forever. And I'm sitting with 39 mil on a good roulette roll. The exact same build with a little bit of extra speed deals more with Steel Strike. And that's not even including all the stuff I can add to it, like Gradient Overcharge, Fortune Fury, Samosa's passive, Greater Powerful, Frenzy, Double Third, all staples in one-shot builds that don't do jack on burn damage. So I think what I'm trying to say is, Sandfall, please fix burn. Don't fix this, fix this. If I'm able to invest enough turns building up burn stacks that I literally break your game, I need it to do more damage than skills I can use on the same build. This is nonsense. How about this? Cap it at 9,999 burn stacks, but also cap the minimum damage of each burn stack to 10% of its normal damage. That way there's a reason to invest in burn damage. In general, you can get crazy one-shot levels with enough investment, but most regular builds are completely unaffected. All the good stuff, no bad stuff, problem solved. Just let us have nice things. Give us enough burn damage to kill Verso a second time. Now, I don't really recommend using either of these builds, but here's how you can replicate these setups. For the damage build, we have all the good damage stuff on Verso, and then we have Luna and Mael with small Lumina setups so they each give us 2 stacks of Clea's Death. Make sure Mael has the Stalin weapon and Luna has the Hell skill. On Mael's turn, just skip, and on Lune's turn just cast Hell, but intentionally miss the QTE. Then as Verso, you free aim the desired target until you're out, base attack, and do it again. Now you should be S rank with maybe 150 burn stacks, which will net you some of the highest burn damage the game can give you. Keep in mind not to try adding burn stacks with any other character, and make sure not to have all 3 combo attacks, because even though Corpeso's main burn supply comes from base attack, hitting 4 times will deactivate Barbapapa, and the 30% buff from Tainted is more valuable than the 40 stacks. If you're confident that you can break the target with Striker, you can take off Feint, add on these Luminas, and use Striker on the second turn to get those meaty stun buffs for 49 million damage. For the setup that crashes your game, have a really fast CL in Minoko. CL needs these Luminas as well as any of the weapons I can give her Foretell and Free Aim. Minoko needs these Luminas and Bagataro. On CL's first turn, you need to do a base attack to apply slow, and on every single other one of her turns, gather 10 Foretell and use Delaying Slash. For Minoko, just Free Aim and Benazir Mortar over and over until you get as much burn as you want. Make sure they both get enough free aims to reapply Rush, because that's going to matter for staying faster than Simon. Anyways, that's about it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more builds and wacky game knowledge like this. I plan on pumping out a bunch more videos soon. We're talking like 2 uploads a month, maybe even more. Do all the algorithm crap.